Welcome to another episode of Stir Crazy on the Real News Network. This is the show we make to keep us from going crazy. With our hosts Kim Brown, Andrew Corkery, Jaisal Noor, and myself, Charles Lenchner. This is the Real News Network's latest show, and we'd love your feedback. Let us know you're here and what's on your mind today. Are we helping you survive another day in isolation? And first, a little anecdote about how we're not quite surviving as well as we'd like. This morning, when I went to get coffee, I realized that I was covered in cat hair and had forgotten my wallet and was wearing sandals. And I thought, I guess being in quarantine is starting to affect my daily routine, as well as my ability to hold a job. What's it like for you guys, Kim?
Well, I saw there was an accident in my neighborhood yesterday. Not funny at all, but one of my neighbors passed away. And from what I'm not exactly sure, but it's definitely made me reassess how to extend sympathies to people in this day and age. So, for example, I was contemplating getting flowers, a card, maybe even making a dish. And I was trying to put myself in the person's shoes, like, well, if I had a relative pass away in my home, would I want any of those things to come to my house right now, especially from multiple people, and we don't know who has what at this point in time. So I guess I'm surviving by seeing how much our normal so-called lives and routines and traditions and mores are changing right before our eyes every single day.
Thank you. How about you, Jessel?
I consider myself extremely privileged at this time because we've all got our jobs secured. We have healthcare, but I've been we are some of the lucky ones right now, and I know we're all really thankful for that. But I've been the last couple of weeks talking to healthcare workers, some that I know personally. Just got off the phone with an Amazon worker. We've been doing reports on all types of people that have been really devastated by the events and just the sheer mismanagement and just complete. I don't know if I'm allowed to say clusterfuck. Um, is probably the best way I can describe the situation right now, and it's just my heart goes out. For me personally, like there's a family member I can't see right now because he's across the country and he's going through like a medical crisis, and I can't risk it. I can't risk going because I'm going to expose other people, and I might expose him. Um, but um, but yeah, this is definitely something that is affecting everybody, and people are really responding through tremendous acts of resilience and self-sacrifice, and that's what keeps me going. That's what keeps me hopeful every day.
Nice. And next up, straight from Whiskey A Go Go, we have Andrew Corkery. Tell us what's going on.
Hey, how you doing, Charles? Thanks for having me on the show today. Yeah, I've just been kind of amazed at the fact that basic normal tasks and basic normal things that you kind of go about doing in your everyday life kind of come to a complete standstill. Like today, I was having a conversation with my girlfriend about, you know, are we going to go to the grocery store or are we going to order, food from like one of the delivery services? And, it kind of got into the weeds in terms of like how we were going to do that and why. And it's just something that you don't think about at all. And so I think that in addition to the sort of really perilous situations that this coronavirus has caused and the lack of government action and the lack of kind of government supervision and government regulation and things of that nature that we're going to discuss later on the show, that is really compounded by the fact that everyday people's lives are like kind of uprooted by not being able to do traditional mundane tasks or having to kind of go into this sophisticated algorithm in your head as to like whether or not you can actually go to the grocery store or whether you can drive somewhere. Or for example, for me, I was just recently in a car accident right before this whole thing started just a couple weeks ago, and I have to go to physical therapy appointments as related to that. And so I'm trying to weigh in my head like whether or not I should go do that based on, me putting myself, and because I'm out of a car, my girlfriend and other people at risk. And so it's just really hard
Do
to
it
think
online,
about.
Andrew. Andrew, you gotta find someone that'll do it online for you. Just get the materials you need, because you now want to be going even to. You don't want to be into a hospital, but even those small clinics are going to be out of supplies. So
right, exactly.
Don't do it, man. Don't do it.
Yeah. So this is something I'm looking into, but I actually did order like a roller from Amazon so that you could I can do some of these exercises here on my own. But that kind of pales in comparison to the situation that millions and millions of workers across the country in the U.S. are having to deal with, and particularly the lack of social safety net in America's society is completely borne out and is naked for everyone to see at this point in time.
Absolutely. Andrew, you're also a musician. Have you had any shows canceled yet?
Yeah, so my band actually had a show coming up on the 8th in New Jersey, like where I'm from, and that was canceled because New Jersey, just like New York, is like, kind of ground zero for the situation in America right now as it relates to COVID-19. And so I just checked in with the promoter to kind of just the other day to make sure that, hey, this isn't happening, right? Yeah, so I was reassured with that. But yeah, definitely, sending some thoughts and prayers and love out to people in all these states that are affected more acutely than other places around the country as well. People in New York, people in Philly and New Jersey and other places, California and things like that. But yeah, I've had like a good amount of shows canceled, and I also bought tickets to Firefly to go see Rage Against the Machine, and as of last week, that was totally canceled, and that's in June, middle to end of June. So you got to think that promoters and people that are planning events are thinking that this is going to be a long-term issue. Some people seem to think that this is going to be like a couple weeks, and Trump keeps talking about this this Easter bullshit that he's going to open up the economy, and it doesn't make any sense, especially when all these other organizations are shutting down or closing down events and different things like that. So those are just some of the things with music.
Instead of raging against the machine, we have a president who rages against reality. Now for the first segment, we have a fellow musician. I hope I'm saying his name right. He seems to be quite well known in the hip hop or rap community. His name is Plies. I hope that's how I say it. And he has been dubbed the voice of the proletariat. Dwayne, what does he have to say?
I woke up this morning, I thought about it. I said, yeah, all this shit about we the richest country in the world. I get all of that. But what I don't get, you tell us 100,000 people gonna die from this pandemic. Only 3,000 people that died so far. So that means 97,000 more fucking people gotta die. And you got people out here still on the fucking front line working. Whether they at Publix, whether they at Walmart, whether they work at the bank, airline stewardess, or fucking doctors. People out here on the front line still risking their fucking life while you CEOs home quarantining with your goddamn family. And all I'm saying is, if they gonna risk their fucking life, pay them like they fucking risking their life. You don't risk your fucking life for no $9 an hour, no $11 an hour, no fucking $30 an hour. Pay them like they fucking risking their life.
Kim, that was the nation's anger translator. What do you have to say about this?
No, Dr. Plies, got his degree, his doctorate in sociology right there. He summed that up pretty accurately. I mean, and he showed us how he understands how, virology and epidemiology works at the same time, because, if we have 3,000 people dead, they're projecting, I think 100,000 is on the low side from what the White House coronavirus task force has indicated. But he's correct. First of all, our minimum wage is already awful. The federal minimum wage is $7.25. And in most states, or at least some states around the country, some places have gotten up to $15 an hour. Most places have not. And, aside from the fact that $15 an hour is not really a livable wage in the first place, even though that is the high end of some of the organizing goals that people are trying to do. In order to really live in the United States, you need to be paid at least $25 an hour, maybe $30 an hour, depending on where you live. And he's 100% correct. People should not be out here risking their lives. The people who are delivering groceries, the people who are stocking the shelves, our sanitation workers, people who are still in restaurants cooking food. It is dangerous work. And at the end of this, I don't know, or any of us really don't know when the end of this is going to be. We have to really reassess and reallocate the way that people who work in some of these professions are paid relative to their worth of their position, which we are seeing is quite valuable at this time, and relative to the amount of risk that involves doing some of the work, especially during this pandemic, which is why so many workers are advocating right now for hazard pay, for example. A lot of grocery workers want more money an hour. That's what the whole Instacart boycott was about. Amazon workers. I mean, they're all 100% correct. Implies nailed it, baby. He took the words right out of my mouth.
It sounds like we're witnessing a rapid escalation of class resentment leading to class warfare, and we're here for it. And helping to stoke the fires is Jaisal, who's going to talk about our next story, the billionaires behind the crisis. And just to set the stage here, this is from an organization called Little Sis that researches the connections between the rich and the powerful and the cost cutting that happens behind the scenes at the state and local level. Their theory of action is that it's not enough to rail against the wealthy or hedge funds or whoever else is intervening in our social systems. They want to put names and faces on that. So their reporting, or the reports they put out, really try and help us understand precisely who it is that's messing up. Jaisal, tell us more.
So one of the biggest villains in America right now is Jeff Bezos. He's worth $120 billion. For weeks now, Amazon workers around the country and the world have been warning of unsafe conditions. And the response from when I say unsafe conditions, I mean no social distancing inside warehouses. I mean no sanitary supplies. I mean no hand sanitizer or any kind of protective mask in these warehouses that could have hundreds or thousands of people inside of them at any time. And now workers have been protesting for weeks and for months, for years really, about conditions, but especially, during this crisis when, we're in a situation where, as, horrible as Amazon workplace conditions are, they are actually, it's better to order stuff to get it delivered to you than to go to a grocery store or go somewhere else where you interact with people and you raise your chances of getting a community transmission. And so, orders at Amazon have gone through the roof. They have sought to hire 100,000 more workers, and workers are, at Amazon around the country are outraged. Worker Chris Smalls in New York yesterday, he had a protest. He organized some workers. He got fired for his actions. And Jay Carney, the former Obama press secretary, went on Twitter saying, like, look, he wasn't fired because of his organizing. He was fired because he violated social distancing. And so there's a couple of things to unpack here real quick. Amazon worker I talked to just a few minutes ago at one of the Baltimore warehouses where they've had first case, and there's rumors that there might be many more cases, that Amazon is just keeping it quiet. He said it's impossible to have social distancing in these warehouses. There's no social distancing happening, and they're hiring more and more workers. So that's a lie. And then Paul Blessed from Vice News just broke a story revealing internal communications with Amazon executives, which verbatim is what Jay Carney was tweeting at that tweet at Bernie Sanders in support of Smalls. Just exposing that they basically wanted to make out Smalls as the villain and saying they fired him because he have his actions, not because he's an organizer. And all I can say is, from the workers I've talked to, it is backfired. Workers are, the mask is off on Amazon. They know exactly what Amazon's tactics are. And, it's not deterred them to organizing. It has struck fear in a lot of people. For a lot of people, if this was their second job is closed. One of the workers I talked to today, his second job was a bookstore. That's closed. He's saying that some of the workers are working up to 60 hours a week now, and they're still part-time. They're not getting offered health insurance, even though they're risking so much for Amazon, for their bottom line, but for also everyone else. And that's just one example. You got one person making all these profits off of the labor of these workers, and it's just it's America for you.
It is indeed. Let's Dwayne, can you get us set up on that video that we have about what's going on with Boeing? Here we have
and I try to be fair on this in my blog post. We aren't handing them $17 billion. We're lending them $17 billion. And presumably they'll pay it back. But the point here is we're lending it at well below the market interest rate. This is a common trick, because you can be sure that if people start to complain about this 1, 2, 3 years out, I don't know how long Boeing will take to repay their loan, we're going to hear, oh, we got paid back with a profit. Well, that's fine. But the point here is we're giving it to them at below market interest rate. And every business person knows that's a big concession, and a really big concession when we're in a crisis as we are today. So I just said, let's assume that they're getting a loan at 5 percentage points less than the market rate. I don't know whether that's right or wrong. Could be higher, could be lower, but good place to start. That's in effect handing them $850 million. So that's a lot of taxpayer dollars. But the main point I'd like to make there is that, we are giving this to them at a below market rate, and that's often missed or will be missed when people say it got paid back with interest. Now, the other point is that, what are the conditions? Do they have to keep their workers on the payroll? Are they being prevented from paying out dividends, share buybacks? Can they give their CEO $15 million? Their last CEO was a disaster, walked away with over $60 million. And so the conditions aren't very, very tough. The conditions in here say they have to keep workers on as much as practical. Well, that's essentially meaningless. People know how to write binding language. That's not binding. That's basically a joke.
So the issue here, gang, is that the part of the package, the $2 trillion that Congress approved, are a whole slew of benefits, loans, giveaways to corporate America. That was Dean Baker of CEPR, Center for Economic
Policy Research. Yeah.
Policy Research. Thank you for helping out. Explaining the details of the specific chunk of $17 billion that's going to go to Boeing. Boeing, which has been involved now for quite some time in a big mess because of a defective airplane that they released in the face of safety concerns from their own staff. Now going to get this low interest loan, which basically amounts to a giveaway. They're one among many, and the government could be using its power as the force that's helping these companies survive to extract concessions for the workers, for our communities, and they seem to not be doing that at all. What are we going to do?
Get the guillotines ready, man.
Hey.
What are the alternatives? Seriously, folks, at this point, because I've made this point before. I'm not very old, but this is the second time in my adult life that I've seen this type of bullshit come from the federal government, regardless of who's in charge, Democrat or Republican. I know Trump is shitting the bed with this whole COVID-19 pandemic, just doing a terrible job at that. But it really wouldn't matter if there was a Democrat in the White House for this particular situation, for the economic fallout, which would have been happening regardless of who was in charge at this point, right? So the giveaways to the corporations without conditions is standard operating procedure at this point. And the problem is we don't have a viable party that we can vote for to get the people who keep approving these type of uneven deals, especially for the American people, working people who are struggling right at this moment. There's no advocacy for us. And I know a lot of people say Bernie, but we see Bernie's getting kneecapped right now by the Democratic establishment. Like, they don't want Bernie. And Bernie's the only candidate still in the race who is at least advocating for protections for workers, for people who are in terrible financial straits right now. So what are we to do? It's guillotine time. I mean, what other time is it? What time is it, kids? I don't know what time it is. Y'all tell me.
Dwayne, can you load up that Bootsy song off of YouTube? Go ahead, Jaisal.
Yeah, I mean, we are in this together. And I mean, so look, corporations got bailed out. Workers got maybe $1,200, which isn't going to cover rent for a lot of people. Like Kim was saying, minimum wage is so low for most families. You need to be earning 2 or 3 times that. You need to be working 2 or 3 jobs to make a living wage, to have your bare necessities made on a living wage. So they say there's no money to help out working people that are running this economy, these essential workers that are sacrificing everything, risking getting something and bringing it home to their families. And yet, unlimited corporate funding with no accountability for these big corporations. I think it's important we remember this and remember the people that are making this possible. We remember the senators that that were publicly, like Senator Loeffler from Georgia, right, publicly talking about how this is fine, everything's going to be fine, we have it under control, weeks before Trump, took any serious action, and then privately cashing out, selling their stocks, buying stocks in companies that do telecommuting, that do, that create PPE. So, this is the American system under Trump. The mask is off. And the question is, will there be an alternative? I mean, I think the top priority for a lot of people is still getting Trump out of office. But then when you have the leading candidate, Joe Biden, that's not even really willing to take shots at him or really criticize his response. The question for the Democrats is this the person that you want facing Trump in November? And now I'm just reading a headline that Trump is said he might consider expanding Medicare and Medicaid, and some of 30 million and growing, counting Americans that are uninsured. So Trump is putting himself to the left of Joe Biden in this crisis, because he just came out and said he's still against Medicare for all because it's not going to solve this crisis, which we know that at least the people that are unemployed could have health care. So, that's where we're at.
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting that you mentioned the phrase mask off, which I see on Twitter a lot. And I feel like that's a good name for this little historical era that we're in, where certain things are being exposed for what they really are in a dramatic way. And Andrew, that brings us to this next story that you're going to talk to us about. And Dwayne, we're starting with that video, but this is about an issue in Texas where pastors, and they're not alone, demanding the right to hold services at church in the face of warnings and restrictions and quarantines, that doing so is going to severely risk the people participating in those services. It brings to mind those bracelets, what would Jesus do? And I just can't shake the feeling that Jesus would not be trying to infect his best followers as fast as possible. Let's see that video, Dwayne.
I believe there's nothing more important than faith during a time like this. And as a sheriff's office, we would never impede someone's ability to lean on their religious beliefs as a means of comfort. But practicing those beliefs.
So that's the sheriff of the town where this is happening, basically announcing his intention to arrest the pastor in question for behaving so foolishly. And while we might laugh at these at one particularly passionate religious person, this is happening elsewhere as well. Andrew, what can you tell us?
Yeah, so basically last week in particular, as it's related to this Vox article that was written up about a group of Texas pastors demanding the right to spread COVID-19 at church services, which sounds like a dystopian line from Orwell's 1984 or something like that. But it's actually happening. So last week, Harris County, who oversees the area of Texas that includes Houston, issued an order requiring all individuals within Harris County to stay, at their place of residence except for essential activities. Now, it allows faith leaders and ministers to console in individual settings so long as social distancing protocols are followed, and it requires worship services to be provided by video and teleconferencing only. And as as it relates to that, the restriction on in-person worship services has sparked this lawsuit that's now filed by 3 Texas pastors and a medical doctor and an anti-LGBT Republican activist whose political action committee was specifically labeled as a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center. These 4 men are taking this to the Texas Supreme Court to strike down the order from Harris County, claiming that, among other things, that it violates religious liberty of the pastors who wish to gather their parishioners together during the pandemic. And they've also organized a petition to help them in this process. And it essentially asked the Texas Supreme Court to place a temporary interests of a few pastors before the interests of combating a deadly pandemic disease that's sweeping the globe, and putting the pastors and those particular parishioners in front of everyone else in society, which is just completely anathema to what should actually be taking place at this particular point in time.
So guys, let me hop in here real quick, because the video that we saw was from Hillsborough County, which is in Florida. It's where Tampa is. And just to give you guys an example, or 2 examples rather, about how prevalent that this type of mentality is amongst different religious leaders throughout the country. What you're talking about in Texas is separate from what happened in Tampa Bay. That sheriff, who was so pissed off, was referring to the pastor of a church called The River. His name is Howard Brown. 2 consecutive Sundays, this asshole held church service. Both services were attended by at least 500 parishioners, okay? And that's why the sheriff was so upset, because there had been a social distancing order in place, one separate from what the Florida governor, Ron DeSantis, put in place, I think yesterday or the day before. But locally, there was a social distancing order, and there was restrictions on religious gatherings. And this guy willfully violated that, obviously putting about 1,000 people at risk for infection from COVID-19. But he said to the local media today in Florida that the reason why he's shutting down his church services, mind you, he was arrested for reckless endangerment, but he said not to protect, he's shutting down his services not to protect his congregation from the pandemic, but to protect them from a tyrannical government. So if it weren't for law enforcement getting involved, at least in this particular case in Florida, this guy would still be having church services. And there was another case of a pastor in Louisiana who was also arrested. I think it was a community outside of Baton Rouge, for holding church services in violation of social distancing. And I don't know why these people are in such a hurry to send their parishioners to go see Jesus. I know they expect to see Jesus.
Wait. Maybe we figured it out.
I know, but I mean, do they want to take the Acela train to go see Jesus? You don't want to see Jesus in normal time? You know what I mean? Why do you want to go see Jesus on the end of a ventilator? You know what I mean? Like, stay home, folks. Like, you can. My mama's church has been having church on Facebook for like a month now. It's there's nothing wrong with it. Jesus will come to your house. You don't got to go see Jesus. He will come to you.
Jesus is already in your house, if I understand the believers correctly.
Correct. So don't be in a rush. Don't be in a rush. Just stay home.
Don't be in a rush. There's plenty of time for that. Andrew?
Yeah. No, I was just going to say real quick, I think that this particular issue with the pastors kind of, putting this massive public health burden on the particular communities that they're involved in is really illustrative of this sort of left, I guess you would call it left-right divide within the Christian church, and sort of the MLK style, Christianity that kind of takes place at a lot of churches around the country that is very beneficial, that puts the needs of the poor and the downtrodden, first, and sort of this quasi-individualistic religious fundamentalism that kind of almost bears no resemblance to what MLK talked about in its kind of warped thinking. So I think it's important to kind of make that distinction when talking about some of these religious groups and like the particular elements of their ideologies that inform these the way that they're functioning in society.
Right.
Yeah, and I think we have to. Oh, I was
Sorry,
just
go
going to
ahead,
quickly
Jaisal.
jump in, and I had someone to add that we can't forget that these are also grifters, right? They're selling, these people are the same people that are selling, snake oil treatments, and it's not just religious people, right? Like Alex Jones got a cease and desist, a conspiracy theorist, Alex Jones got a cease and desist order last week from the Attorney General of New York, telling, of New York City to stop selling these fake remedies, which goes all the way up to the president, right? People died because they listened to Trump's talk about a treatment which actually cures another disease, and now there's a shortage of the treatment for the people that actually need it. So, this doesn't discriminate against only people that are using this for faith.
There's no crisis that man can't make worse. So moving on to our next story. This is kind of what's special about America. How is it that the U.S. political system has been able to manage the crisis in the worst possible way? I mean, there should be some kind of an award for this. We've really messed things up. Andrew, how did that happen, and what does it say about us?
Yeah, so I think that it kind of gets to this core struggle that like the American capitalist class is kind of really found difficult, which is trying to provide enough healthcare so that they can stop the spread of a pandemic that's sweeping the globe, but just enough to deal with that, no more. Just you can't, if you have diabetes, if you have cancer, if you have all these other extenuating issues and all these other chronic illnesses and things of that nature, that's not covered because that's baked in, right? Like that's already like part of how the ruling class kind of deals with these medical issues. And so it's actually really interesting. There was a couple really good articles in the New York Times about this, and I'm just going to paraphrase a couple bits of what I found in this article, which I thought were really worth pointing out. It basically talks about how this is not happening in other places because throughout the world, governments are, protecting employment. Specifically, workers, are keeping their jobs, even in industries that are entirely shut down at this point in time. The government covers most of the wages through direct payments to employers, and wages, in effect, are socialized for the duration of the crisis. And instead of safeguarding employment, America is basically relying on this antiquated, inefficient system of beefing up the unemployment benefits, which already don't cover a majority of what people make in their daily jobs. So to try to shield these laid off workers. And to give one example in particular, I thought was very poignant in this New York Times piece, was that in the United States and Britain, I mean, Britain has its own capitalist issues as well that I'm sure we can talk about ad nauseum on another day. But the government is asking in the UK is asking, and in the US, the government is asking restaurant workers to stay home. But in Britain, workers are receiving 80% of their pay, up to £2,500 a month, or at least $3,125 in US. And that's guaranteed. And they're guaranteed to get their job back once the shutdown is over. So they're going to have a much better adjustment period than the US is, because the problem is in the US, these people get laid off, it's already bad enough. Like they can't get access to resources. The unemployment roll is like completely filled up. And not to mention that people are going to be losing their health care in the US, which is another, another star for a number one good job done by America. Everyone keeps saying how America's number one and all of this stuff. And yeah, we are number one in not providing any health care to anyone unless they're dying of a pandemic. And even then we want to quabble over, how we get them that treatment and who's going to make the money and like all these different things, when in reality, you need to focus on curtailing this pandemic immediately, and all these other superficial, value sets really have to go by the wayside.
Everybody's talking about how this phase that we're in, where we're going to ramp up to maybe 100,000 people dying of the disease in the next few months, that's only one part of how this disease, COVID-19, is going to work its way through our system. The second time, the third time, the fourth time, we'll have tens of millions of people out of work, unable to pay rent, unable to hand in their mortgage payments, unable to provide for their partner or children or elderly relatives who need their help. What are we going to do then when this disease is ravaging us and people have been suffering from those economic problems without enough government support?
I mean, you're kind of already seeing it. We've seen a growing movement for rent strikes and people refusing to pay their landlords, to pay their mortgages. Rightfully so. They've lost their jobs. We are, as we said, our social safety net is non-existent. And the way that this country is set up, at least laterally the past, 10, 20 years with the gig economy, it's not designed for real financial success. I mean, just think about all the people that go into tremendous amounts of debt just to go to college in hopes of getting a better paying job. Well, I feel horrible for college students right now. The class of 2020 coming out into the world amidst, a growing recession, possibly depression, and a pandemic. And Trump is still president. I mean, that's triple whammy. That would suck really at any age, but especially at the age when you are about to springboard into adulthood and hopefully into your career. It's got to be a little daunting out there for the younger people and for the older people too, who are facing this down, knowing that this idiot is in charge, knowing worried about their adult children and where they may end up suffering as a result of all this. But when it comes to economics, again, I only have my life to judge, right? I mean, we can look back in history, but I think recent history is proof positive enough. I mean, Ronald Reagan spit that trickle down economics bullshit for 8 years straight. And then George H.W. Bush came through with it for another 4 years. So we had 12 years of them telling us that trickle down economics is going to work if we, lower taxes on corporations. And then we saw an economic, lift during the Clinton administration, just for it to go back down again when the Republicans were in charge. So if you want to talk about economic failure, we don't need to look much further than the administrations of the most recent Republican presidents. Look how much the economies have been left in shambles when Republicans take office. And Trump can say that, the economy was booming under him. I always felt a lot of those unemployment numbers were fuzzy math, because I knew a lot of people who were A, not working, or B, working hourly jobs, working multiple hourly jobs. And that to me never sounded like an economy that was thriving.
Yeah, just to add one,
I think it's worth.
Point. Oh, sorry. You can go, Jaisal.
Yeah, I think it's worth mentioning that even under Obama, which is a Democratic administration, we had one of the weak economic recoveries. We had tremendous amounts of wealth going just to the wealthiest. And we had a lot of these jobs that were created as, part-time. You had the beginning of the gig economy, part-time jobs, jobs without benefits, jobs without any kind of, career path. So, we got to make sure to hold the Democrats accountable too. Under Clinton, you had this so-called welfare reform, the expansion of mass incarceration. So there's definitely enough blame to go around.
That's right. And there are a few good things, though, that we might be able to point to. One, Kim, is the shattering of illusions among millions of young people. We're going to have that same lovely effect that we had in 2008 that led to the outbreak of Occupy Wall Street. Who knows what young people whose futures are on the line have in store for us this time? And of course, well, if there was a second thing, I don't remember what it was. So let's move on. Let's move on to our next story.
I hope the kids have gasoline in hand, gasoline and matches, because it's time for it to burn it down. Damn it! I mean, and burn it down while I'm young enough to get out there and help. Okay, please.
I love this. I wish we were on the public airwaves so that we could be threatened with a shutdown because of you. This is great.
Oh, Charles, I just wanted to say real quick before we move on, if it's okay. So speaking to Kim's point about this trickle down theory and like the kind of prevalence of it, I know like a lot of people on the left talk about it a lot, but just anecdotally, when I was in college, I worked at Sears as well. And I worked at in the shoe department, and there was this man that stocked our shoes. And he was a 91-year-old World War II veteran, a black man. His name was Mr. Earl, and he always came in and always told me, Andrew, I'm still looking for my trickle that Reagan was talking about like 20 years ago. Do you have it? Do you have my trickle? I'm like, I never got a trickle. He says, I ain't even got a drop. I never even got a drop out of that. And so just thinking about it, I mean, it's a funny story thinking about it in my head, but like it really is the lives of millions of people across this country. And that myth just has to be completely dispelled if it hasn't been already.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Also,
even during the reign of the P-tape president, there is no trickle down.
Exactly.
Also, but Andrew, the real lesson you learned there was always listen to old Black people.
Yes. Yes.
This is another lesson, exactly.
All right, we're moving on to our next story, and this is about the fate of the conventions. Now, this is a big deal. The next president for sure is going to be a Democrat or a Republican, and the entity that designates who the nominees are, not that we don't know, but those are the conventions. For all their failures of turning what should be a truly grassroots, bottom-up democratic event into a made-for-television propaganda tool for each of the parties, nonetheless, this is what we have in order for there to be democracy in choosing our nominee for the next president. But it looks like we might not get to having actual conventions this year. Jaisal, fill us in.
Yeah, well, we know that sort of breaking news, the Democratic Party delayed their convention to August 15th after Joe Biden, the front runner, maybe presumptive nominee at this point, depending who you ask, he requested it. And there's talk of potentially it being, remote, or even the voting be remote, because even by August, there's no guarantee that this will have coronavirus pandemic will have subsided, and then the risk continues for people that haven't got it yet and don't have those immunities and that are could spread it. You have delegates coming from thousands of people coming from all over the country. You have on one hand the Democrats sort of listening to this, but on the other hand you have Donald Trump telling Sean Hannity last week there's no way that he would cancel the RNC in Charlotte, which you have to take him on his word for that at this point. But so those are good signs, I think. I mean, one of the troubling signs is that there's a Democratic governor in Wisconsin. There's a primary on Tuesday, and despite pleas from just about everybody, they're refusing to delay it. We might actually have a vote in Wisconsin on Tuesday, which is completely insane because the early voting was totally screwed up. You had polling sites closed. I think Wisconsin might be trying to give New York a run for its money as the hotspot for this in the U.S. We saw a lot of states that voted a couple weeks ago that they've had an explosion of cases, especially among poll workers, and that was a couple weeks ago. So this is a whole different ball game, and they're also obviously expecting or saying this will amount to voter suppression. That a lot of people won't go to the polls if they're at risk, or if they've listened to some of the candidates. I think Bernie Sanders has encouraged his voters to not show up.
Right. One thing I was wondering about is what's going to happen to the traditional celebrations, protests that occur at conventions. How are we going to make sure that the disaffected get their voice heard? I'm thinking especially of those that aren't satisfied with either Democrats or Republicans. By not having conventions, we'd be silencing their voices too.
Yeah, and what's interesting, obviously, that the traditional protests, you go back to '68 or even in 2016, you saw sizable demonstrations out in the streets of Philly and Cleveland. So obviously, a lot of stuff is going to switch to being online. But one of the tactics we've seen, especially around protests against the incarceration of so many people in prisons where they've had outbreaks of COVID-19, is that if people still show up, they show up in their cars and do a protest surrounding sites with mass amounts of people in their cars, so they're socially distanced. So that could be one option. You could shut down, if there is a physical convention, you could shut it down with cars. If it's all online, then people are going to have to think of some. And I have full faith that people would be able to come up with some creative ways to have disruption, even to this process if it is online.
The fact that Trump is saying that the Republican convention is going to go on no matter what. I mean, I hope that Trump supporters hear him and other members of the Republican leadership loud and clear, not just from this, but from their other comments saying that it's time for older people to make the sacrifice in order for the economy to go on in their spirit. They don't care. I mean, and this is not a shock to us. You know, we have known long since before now, from Republican policies, from the things that they advocate for, also from the things that they advocate for cutting, you know, from the pandemic team at the White House to cutting Medicare, Social Security, cutting Medicaid for the states, to expand the Affordable Care Act. They are not interested in maintaining the health of not only their constituents, but really just people at large. And at some point, there has to be, I guess, a tipping point for conservatives and for their leaders, for them to get that these are not the people who are interested in your inherent survival. And in fact, they push for policies that will ultimately hasten your own demise. And these things, I've been waiting for this moment to sort of blossom into this awakening and this reckoning for conservatives to be out there really holding their own leaders accountable for these gross failures in maintaining public health. But it hasn't happened yet. And I don't know if it's even going to happen in the midst of all of this. It's pretty remarkable. And when you look at some polling, how much Republicans support or think that Donald Trump is doing a good job of handling this. And there's a real disconnect that has been in place for a while, but it's so stark given the fact that we're in the midst of a pandemic. We're not doing very well versus the pandemic. And Donald Trump still wants to see you in Charlotte this summer to make sure that he's a Republican nominee for president. I mean, it's astounding.
And then meanwhile, just some breaking news, Joe Biden wants people in Wisconsin to vote in person.
Are you fucking
saying that,
serious?
Yeah, he just said it like an hour ago. He says maybe some mail-in ballots. He refuses to support an all mail-in election. And this is a tweet from a journalist online. But we'll see if he comes around. But essentially, Kim, your point. But now this is Joe Biden that's putting people's lives at risk. It's absolutely disturbing and appalling.
This is what happened in Florida. They're saying that
exactly.
part of the reason that the outbreak has started to spike in Florida is because people went out and voted 2 weeks ago. Joe Biden's campaign spokesperson, Simone Sanders, deleted tweets that she posted encouraging people to go vote in person. I mean, this is absolute madness. And for reasons, clearly, the Democrats must want Donald Trump to be a two-term president, right? There's no way that they think that Joe Biden is actually going to do anything.
This is Biden's plan to do worse in the Rust Belt states than Hillary Clinton.
That's a tall order.
Has to be the only it can be done. Thank you guys. We're gonna skip over two of our stories because of time, and we're heading over to the fun section, which we put at the end to reward those of you who stay tuned for the entire show, of course. And the first one we have, I want to use the right name. I'm thinking of this guy. I call him the Tiger Dude because he had real life characters on the Netflix documentary series about tiger zoos. I don't know, tiger torture facilities all over Florida or something. Dwayne, let's run that clip.
This is Jeff and Lauren from the Tiger King. And with the next financial crisis in full swing, the collapse of global capitalism is all but inevitable. But take comfort, Jonathan. Communism will rise from its ashes. We will defeat the billionaires and take America back. Workers of the world unite. Stay strong. Watch season 2. We won't be there.
Bye, guys.
So the context here is there's an economy of sorts where you can pay D-list celebrities to say anything you want them to. You're basically paying them to make a short clip for you. I thought that was one of the better uses of that by friend of the show, Jonathan Smucker. So that was great. Any other comments out there? Any fans of that Tiger show?
I actually just watched like 4 episodes of this in a row last night, and it's awesome. I gotta say that documentary is insane. You kind of think you know where it's going to begin with, and then it just kind of takes some really, really strange turns. And it's very interesting. If people want to watch it, go right ahead. But there's also a whole lot, Charles, you'll like to know this, but there's a whole lot of memes related to the show as well. And there's all these memes about how different characters are related to different signs, of people, like, different signs people have, and how you act as one of these people on the show. And it's like, there's a whole subculture of this thing already, which is just ridiculous. But yeah, it's a really interesting show, and I'm kind of curious as to how your friend got all that information for him and contacted him, in relation to the show.
I guess Kim and Jaisal are not fans of the show yet, but I'm
it's
sure
on my next show. I just got through this third season of Ozarks last night, so that was about the most depressing thing I could have watched. So I need
no spoilers. No,
Chernobyl's worse. Chernobyl's more depressing.
I haven't watched Ozark yet. I haven't watched Tiger King or Tiger Shark, whatever the name of this show is, just because there's so much chatter about it online. I almost feel like there's peer pressure to start watching it right away. So fuck you guys. I'm watching it next month.
Thank you for that rousing remark. And in line with that,
we'll look forward to your class analysis in a month, Kim.
Come through.
Now's the time to let all of our viewers know that it is spring fundraising season for us here at the Real News Network. We rely on your support. We need you to smash that donate button. And here to jog you is our clip.
Hi, my name is Tunde. I'm a studio tech here with the Real News. In addition to all the techie stuff like working with the cameras, editing, and all that good stuff, I actually work with 4 high schoolers who are interns for us right now. We just go through the whole production process and just kind of showing them the ropes of how to do what we do. And that's what we do here at the Real News. We don't just try to be in the community, but we want to be a part of the community. And so if you like what we do, you appreciate our work, please feel free to donate. Right now we're in the middle of a fundraiser. We're trying to raise about $50,000. So if you want to go to therealnews.com and click that donate button, we match every donation. So go there, realnews.com, click donate, click. Thanks in advance.
All right, we'll just pause the show for a few minutes while you. All right, just kidding. Moving from tigers to snakes, we have Samuel L. Jackson here with a wonderful at-home scene for us all, especially those of you with children at home.
Stay the at home. The Rona is spreading. The is no joke. It's no time to work or roam. The way you can fight it is simple, my friends. Just stay the at home. Now, technically, I'm not a doctor, but mother listen when I read a poem. So here I am, Sam Jackson, imploring you, keep your ass at home. If you want things to get back to normal, don't panic. Just use your dome. Wash your hands, stop touching your face, and stay the at home. Motherfucker, it's no time to gamble. Look around, you're not at a casino. Just stay the home as if your name was Trenton Quarantino. Sure, you can still see your friends. Use the mother app on your phone. But unless you just ran out of groceries, please stay the at home. Thank you for doing your part to flatten the curve, because that is steep. And now that you're home, please feel free to go the to sleep.
Thank you, Samuel L. Jackson. Anyone else know want to tell us what the original version of that was?
Go the fuck to sleep.
There we go.
Children's story for the kids, written narrated by Sam Jackson. But can I say this? Sam Jackson is one of the patron saints of profanity. I humbly bow at his altar because he can say motherfucker unlike a whole lot of motherfuckers. And I personally appreciate it. You see, I got a Richard Pryor on my wall. I love people who dabble and who are just proficient and immensely graceful and fluid with letting the profanity drop off of their lips. So yes, pay homage to the God MC, Sam Jackson.
I'm thinking in any moment of crisis where you really want a leader to kind of restore order with the power of their voice and personality, it's too bad Samuel L. Jackson isn't in that role for us as a country. And oh well. So on to our next bit, and this is the almost the last one here. It turns out that you can get free beer, especially if you adopt a pet. So I'm reading the story here, and it looks like Busch Beer is incentivizing you to foster a pet during the coronavirus lockdown. I think this is a wonderful marriage of two of America's great pastimes, drinking alcohol and owning pets. Who on the show owns a pet right now? And those of you who don't, what's wrong with you?
I am looking into it right now. I'm like extremely allergic to dogs, but I've been spending time doing research and I really want to get a puppy. So I don't know if anyone has recommendations, but it's actually really hard to adopt a hypoallergenic dog. So I've been talking to a few friends who have them, but I've been sort of getting on the email list of all the local shelters around here. And it seems like there's a huge response right now, especially in this area. So like, I can't even get a call back. I'm trying to stay away from, breeders, which are gross, and stores, which actually this one called me back right away. But then I actually looked into what they do and I'm just like, nah, I'm good on that. But
Kim, don't shop.
Yeah, no.
Kim, what have you got?
I have 3 dogs. Today is actually Smokey's birthday. So everybody wish Smokey a happy 3rd birthday.
Happy birthday, Smokey.
Yeah. So I don't think this is actually the greatest of ideas for the simple fact that, dogs, especially depending on the breed and depending on the person, they require a lot of attention. And I don't think drunk people can necessarily provide that attention and guidance that perhaps a dog in a new situation would probably require. Also, dogs, if you're drunk, not that I get drunk and do anything bad to my dog, but what I'm saying is some people could take that free beer, get drunk, and then maybe not be so nice to the dog. So I'm not too sure about this particular method of incentivization to get, the pet population out of the shelters. But I think now in general is a good time to be owning an animal if you have, because most times people aren't good pet owners because they don't have time for the dogs. But if you're home, if you're working from home, then you have plenty of time for the dog, and you can walk the dog and social distance and train them and all that. And the dog doesn't have to stay cooped up all day. So, but I don't think you should give people beer to bring pets in their house. I think that's a bad idea.
Done right, owning a dog can keep people away from you when you're in public. Jaisal?
Yeah, like going off Kim's point, I would much rather take 3 months of medicinals over 3 months of beer myself, especially when I'm locked up at home. So
there we go. So Andrew, which personality flaw has led you to not have a pet?
I wouldn't call it really a personality flaw. I'd call it more like an economic restraint, I guess. But yeah, my girlfriend, her parents have 3 dogs, and I've become very familiar with them. We go over before this whole crisis with the coronavirus started, we went over there a lot, and she has a Samoyed and 2 Huskies. And so, all like northern breeds. My sister has a cat. I've actually come to like the cat because it doesn't make me sneeze, because it's not one of these ones that like sheds all over the place constantly. So that's nice. And it does the most ridiculous things. And I know that the cat being there for them now, based on me talking to them on the phone, is making them feel a lot better than it would if they didn't have the cat there. So I can definitely appreciate that. And like having animals at home, whether it's, for me, preferably it's like one or two, but hey, some people have like 7 animals, at home. And if that makes them feel better during this crisis, and if that helps us break the back of the curve, then I'm all for it. I'm just kind of curious as to how much exactly is 3 months supply of beer, and like, is there kind of a rationing process that's involved in that? So that's what I'm curious about.
We need to do more research on that.
Yeah.
And now we're gonna go to our final segment. Dwayne, why don't you just load that up and we'll talk about it after.
Just speak to everybody, Mum. Say hello. Hello, everybody. I'm still here. I'm telling you, I'm like a bad penny. There's no getting rid of me. And I hope you're all keeping well and doing what you're told. Keep to the rules and you'll all be fine. It'll all pass. Bye-bye for now. Love you all and think about you a lot.
Well, now I just feel bad. What? Who picked that video? I want an answer. What did we just see there?
We saw the muse for Mrs. Doubtfire. Clearly, that's the first thing I saw when I saw that cute old lady. I said, "Oh, Robin Williams must have met her 30 years ago and decided to channel her for that role." She's so adorable, and she's 93 years old. You see how spry that old lady was? I love it.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, that's the good living that we hope our entire audience abides by. And we get Zeke wishing everyone a good day tomorrow if they own cats. Any other final comments before we close out? What's in store for us?
I would just say that the old can sometimes keep the young videos like that. I spent a lot of time with my grandfather as well, and I know Jaisal does the same. And they have this foresight and kind of vision in terms of what goes on with the world, because they've kind of seen a lot of different things happen. And I know that sounds super commonplace, but it does actually manifest itself in very key ways that I think help a lot of people get through crises like this. So if you have someone like that, even if they're not related to you, give them a call.
Kim?
Yeah, I want to say, everyone out there, think about your estheticians and your hairstylists and your barbers and your tattoo artists. All of these people lost their jobs in effect. So if you know their Cash App, their Venmo, drop them a few bucks, because it's rough. If you're a sole proprietor, if you rent a booth somewhere in someone else's salon, you earn your money through your hands, through the work that your hands produce. And now they're not able to do that in a safe way. And per the government is closing places, at least here in Maryland. A barbershop got fined and closed for refusing to deny people service and for remaining open. So think about your hairstylists, think about your barbers, think about the people that do your nails. And if you know their cash stuff, drop them a couple dollars, because it's hard out here.
That's right. Jaisal?
Yeah, I'll just say, if you're watching this, you need someone to talk to, reach out to any of us, reach out. I know there's a lot of mutual aid being set up. I know in my neighborhood, I have to go door to door and put flyers out. We can also, if you guys need help, we can connect you with the resources in your community. I know a lot of programs are available. You have to apply for them, especially if you're, having a tough time paying a mortgage or, insurance or anything. There's a lot. Obviously, there's not a whole lot of help coming, but there are some resources available, especially if you need someone to talk to. Reach out. Don't be a stranger.
And Zeke says, meow. Thank you all. Have a good night, and hope we see you tomorrow.